Call and response. The Dharma is vast and subtle.
The Dharma is vast and subtle.
We now have a chance to see this.
We now have a chance to see this.
Study this and practice this.
Study this and practice this.
May we realize this true meaning.
May we realize this true meaning. All right. Thank you guys for being here this morning. It's good to practice with you, and folks online, good to see you all too. Thank you for making yourself present. Last time I shared the Dharma, we looked at this one of the services that we recite called Faith in Mind, and I began just an introduction to it, sharing some of the things that my colleagues have shared about this particular Zen poem. And I learned, and I think maybe perhaps we learned, that it's actually quite central to Soto Zen. It's not something new or something that had been kind of interjected from another tradition. It's very central to Soto Zen. And that was a realization for me, because my teacher told me that it was a text from the Rinzai tradition. So seeing that it was actually centrally located within the Soto Zen tradition, I was like, wow, okay. Let me look at this a little bit more carefully now. So it's always good to question our teachers and make sure that they got it right, because sometimes they don't have it right. My teacher would say, she said this was a quote from the Buddha. I don't know whether it was or not, but it makes a lot of sense to me. She said, the Buddha said that, do you think I'm your best friend? I'm not your best friend. Your best friend is your worst enemy. Why? Because they will help you to hone your understanding. We need our enemies, and we need to keep them close. They're going to help us out more than we think. So this talk, I'd like to share a little bit of my developing understanding of this song, this poem called Faith in Mind. One translation of it is called Faith in Mind. What's the translation we use here?
Verses on the Faith Mind.
Verses on the Faith Mind. Okay. And today I want to focus on this word faith. It's a very problematic word, isn't it? What does it mean? In a Western context, faith is usually associated with religion, usually associated with Christianity. Belief. There's a deep connection between faith and belief. But that is not the definition that we find of faith when we look at the Chinese character in what's called the Xinjin Mei, faith, mind, poem. That'd be like a direct translation, faith, mind, poem. So I think it's worthwhile understanding or visiting this concept of what we're translating, or what has been translated as faith or trust. I want to look at that concept, particularly the Chinese character, to get a sense of what is this, what are we saying when we say faith in mind? Because as Westerners, we might be conjuring up a particular set of images. We most certainly are conjuring up certain images and ideas that correlate with the word faith. And those images and ideas may not be in alignment with the original Chinese character for the word faith that has been translated as Xin. Actually, my name, Dai Xin, has that character in it. The Xin of Dai Xin is faith. So I'm interested in this. What does it mean? What does this mean? Xin Jin Mei. So the Xin in there is faith. It's been translated as faith, trust, reliance, even believing. These are possible translations. But if we look at the word, the Chinese character itself, it's worthwhile, I think, trying to decipher what this character means or what it is about. And not all Chinese characters can be, you don't automatically look at them and you can tell their meaning by their pictographic form. But this word Xin, I think you can derive some meaning from it. So if I had a whiteboard, I'd write it on here, but the one half of the character is the Chinese character for person. And the other half of the Chinese character is for what it is a mouth, and it's pictured as a kind of a square, a rectangular-ish square, and lines coming up out of the square. And the lines are the reverberations coming out of a mouth, right? That square is the symbol of the mouth, and the lines coming out are the sound waves coming out of the mouth. So it has to do with words, right? Words. So a person on one side standing literally next to their word. This is one way this character has been understood. Somebody who stands by their word. Somebody who stands by their word. This character is very important in Chinese culture. It has a much deeper meaning than the word faith. Faith is something else, but a person who stands by the word. If you don't stand by your word in Chinese culture and Japanese culture, nobody can trust you. So there's some context here for this word Xin. It has to do with making good on one's word. Might be another way to translate it. Making good on one's word, and this making good on one's word is tied to ethics or morality. If you don't make good on your word, if you say you're going to do something but then lack the resources to carry it through, people don't trust you. And it's something that many, at least I know Japanese, are very aware of, and they'll be very careful to say something that they're going to do without first having the resources to actually do it, to carry it out. And so there's a caution about what you actually will say you're going to do until you get to the place where you can actually do it. This is this word, Xin. So it's standing by your word. And if we contrast this idea of morality, of being able to stand by your word, if that's the measure for morality, we can contrast this with the way that we see morality in the West. In the West, morality is often linked with the word choice, with freedom, with oughts and ought-nots, with individual autonomy, right? Ethics is often laid out in that way, kind of big kind of scheme of how we see morality in the West. And I'm not saying that we should disregard that or discard it, but if we want to understand more like what's the context for this word Xin, and we get into the word Xin itself, well, that's going to give us, it's already laying a moral framework. Because when we start to look into the Xin Jin Mei, this verses on the faith mind, we're going into the absolute dimension where if you don't have a grounded ethics, you can use this song to justify just about anything you do, right? So right in the title is baked in an ethical imperative to stand by what you're saying. Trust. This word trust, faith, reliance, belief. So trustworthy might be another translation. Well-intentioned, to be well-intentioned is not enough in this particular cultural context. To be well-intentioned is not enough. You need to have the resources to follow through on what you say you're going to do. And if I introspect here for a moment on my own practice, I can see, boy, there's some times where I say things too soon. I want to do something and I say it, and then I realize I don't have the resources to back it up, and I just put my foot in my mouth, or I'm going to let some people down here. It's a big no-no in Asian culture. So if you find yourself in an Asian context, be careful what you say that you're going to do. If make sure you do it. But we can be a little bit looser here. Another way to think of this term, shin, commitment, a commitment of a benefactor. So if you say you're going to do something, then you commit to doing it. And on the side of the receiver, confidence in the confidence within the beneficiary. The beneficiary has confidence that you will follow through on what you say you're going to do. And the end result here is a fiduciary relationship. There's some kind of a transaction. So it might sound strange to talk about fiduciary responsibilities in a religious context, because in the West, we tend to separate sacred and secular. Secular is money and that kind of thing. But if you have any experience in a Zen center, you know that money is a part of the ebb and flow of a Zen center. And we just have to be acknowledge that piece of it. Even in a church, they send out a basket. You're putting money in it, right? And monks will go out on the alms rounds in Japan, and there is a relationship there that the monks and the nuns establish with the lay community, where they're offering spiritual support in some way in exchange for material goods. There's the Japanese saying, there's a chant that goes with that when you receive alms. Zaiho Kuryo, Zaiho, how's it go now? I haven't said it in a while. Zaiho Kuryo, Dambaramitsu, Gusoko Emman Naishi Hokkai Byodo Ryaku, Zaiho Nisei Kuroku Mujo, Dambaramitsu, Gusoko Emman Naishi Hokkai Byodo Ryaku, Zaiho Nisei. So Zai is material goods, Ho means the Dharma, two worlds, and Zaiho Nisei Kudoku, the merit. Kudoku Mujo is beyond limit. Gusoko Enman. So the sense of the merging of these two worlds, the Nisei Kudoku, the merging of these two worlds. You can only have the spiritual world because there is the material world. And you can only have the material world because there is the spiritual world. The two worlds interact. Secular and the sacred are not separate. And that's not to say that we should not separate sacred and secular. In this country, that's what we at least try to do. But in the ultimate dimension, there's no separation between these two dimensions. So some of these meanings of this word shin might be passing through the minds of the people at least in an Asian context that are reading or chanting the sutra, or certainly by the author of the text, using this particular word shin. But in contrast, what passes through your mind when you hear that word faith? Right? And what might pass through people's mind if I were to take a guess? God, right? God, Jesus, not necessarily faith in a transactional relationship. Right? So notice the different feel there, the contrast. Right? Faith in God, is that a transactional relationship? Maybe we wouldn't think of it in that way. A transactional relationship also would be one of equals. So faith, if we look at it as faith in God, that's not a relationship of equals. Faith in Jesus, that's not a relationship of equals. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's a different. It's a subtlety here. Maybe we associate the word faith with what is good. What is good? Like we think of faith. If somebody has faith, we might equate them with being good, being a good person. Or good might be a quality that one possesses, as opposed to having experiences based in faith, as opposed to having experiences based in faith. I don't know if I can make that clearer. Let me keep going here. Faith might be, we might see in the West, we might see faith as a feeling that you have, as opposed to an action that you do. You might see faith as a feeling, like that person has faith, has a lot of faith. It might be a feeling. Whereas faith in an Eastern context is an activity. Right? You are keeping up your end of the bargain. You're offering this, you're going to follow through on what you say. There's an action going on there. Faith, something you have, right? Faith might be something that you have in a Western context, versus something that you cultivate, right? Something that you might have a little bit of, and you're working on it. Something to work on, to cultivate, like you're growing the garden. And faith may not necessarily be connected to money in Western context. You don't have to have, doesn't necessarily need to be connected to a physical exchange. It might be totally in the realm of the spiritual. So here, I want to take a little shift here now. If we're going to use faith as in our translation, then let's look at it at how it might be thought about in a Western context. This word faith is not obsolete by any stretch, and I want to give some thoughts. I don't have answers to these questions, but I want to give some, maybe have us think a little bit about this word faith from a Western perspective. And first of all, we usually associate faith with the word belief, right? Faith and belief seem to go hand in hand. So faith is something that we use it in the context, faith that there is a God, for example. We have faith that there is a God, or we have belief that God exists. Or we use this word faith to explain the gaps in our knowledge. And as soon as we figure out the answer to that particular gap, then faith is absent. These are ways that we might think of that word faith. Okay, I can have faith in this because we don't have enough information yet. All right. So I'm going to introduce some thoughts on these. These are problematic definitions and ideas of faith. And I'm going to draw on this particular, I've been reading this book called Evolutionary Religion, very interesting, by a philosopher named J.L. Schellenberg. Has anybody heard of him? I hadn't either, and his writing he's an analytical philosopher, so he uses a lot of logic, which I have a hard time getting my mind wrapped around. But then he makes these incredible points using logic also that I'm just like finding my mind really opens up. And he has a whole section here on what he calls imaginative faith. So I want to share some of the points he makes, because I think it can help us to re-envision the word faith and bring it to a proper, appropriate place for us in our particular time, in our particular state. So first thing is, what are the reasons why faith is problematic? So I'll give two. First is, we don't need to tie faith with belief. We don't need to tie faith with belief. There's a distinction between these two, between faith and belief. We can have faith without belief. We can have faith without belief in something. That's an interesting idea, isn't it? You could have faith without necessarily having belief. So we'll say a little bit more about that in a moment, but we can have faith as a quality to live by. We can have faith as a quality to live by, opening to don't know mind. And belief, this idea of belief, doesn't have to be connected to religion at all. It's not faith in the Buddha that we're after, but faith as a quality of being in the world. And it doesn't have to be tied to a particular belief in something. This is so problematic for us because we tie faith to belief in something. What do you believe in? Right? If you were to talk with somebody who finds that you're going to the Zen Center, they'll say, "Oh, what do they believe?" This is so problematic. It pushes us into this kind of catch-22 of like, "Oh, I've got to say I believe in something." Well, you don't have to. That's their problem, right? That's their problem. They're going to have to figure that out. But we don't have to tie faith with belief. Faith is a quality. And a quality that may help us to open our minds to not knowing. So another thing that this philosopher mentioned is that faith that God exists, or faith in the Buddha, or faith in something, faith that this is true, or another reason for that being problematic is that actually it's not problematic. He paints this picture that it's an early, somewhat immature form of religion. And that's why the title of the book is Evolutionary Religion. And he's making this point that human beings have only been around, if we go to the upper ends of this, Homo sapiens have only been around for some 50,000 years. When I say only, right, we've only been around for 50,000 years. And only the last, 2,000 years we've had writing. So that's a very, so the writing aspect of our culture has just been around for a very short time compared to the 50,000 years. But 50,000 years itself is very, very short in an evolutionary perspective. And it's not enough time for us to really see changes in our physical evolution or in our cultural evolution. In other words, there's an assumption being made here that we've got ways to go. We're just at the beginning. We're just at the starting stages of humanity. Humanity has just started, and we don't know what is in store, or how Earth's processes will change us as humans. And also this is connected with the way that religion itself is, that religion is at an early stage of development, and an early stage of development ties religion with belief. And so how might faith look like in a more, let's envision, what might faith look like in a more mature form? Yeah.
Do you want me to wait till you're done, or can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So you said that faith and belief is a more primitive viewpoint, but yet we've also associated it with the West. So that seems a little strange to me. If it were an evolutionary thing, it should be prevalent in all cultures, and as we grow, then we go beyond it. So can you say something about that?
Yeah, I don't have all of the answers to that particular question, but I suspect that most of us here, we see religion through a Western lens.
True.
So I'm kind of working on that particular lens.
Okay.
We don't have to, as far as other cultures and things, there may be that as well. And I think there is. I'm kind of searching for examples, but like, for example, in the Pure Land tradition of Buddhism, there is faith in Amida Buddha, and that if you believe in Amida Buddha, you will go to the Pure Land at the end of your life. So that might apply there as well.
Okay.
I think Zen is very suited actually to kind of playing with ideas around belief, and certainly this song, this poem, Faith in Mind. Zen is one of the things that attracts me to Zen, and maybe for you all also, is that it doesn't let you land on one side or the other, right? That's the wisdom aspect of Zen. And that, I think, is it's going to play an important role, maybe evolutionarily, for us. There's some aspect about that part of Zen that we're attracted to. Like, we know our minds are capable of more, yet we tend to come down into black and white thinking. Yes, no, right, wrong, etc. So it is, I think, in a lot of ways, we think about like a child sees clearly what's good and bad, right? And it's all based on their own wants and likes. And as adults, we just get more clever at hiding our wants and our likes and dislikes. We just get more clever. And Zen is kind of pushing us in the direction of, well, let's see if we can open up those likes and dislikes, and can we hold them? Can we hold them both? Right? And this is, maybe we can, if we're looking, and the danger in this kind of a talk is that we think that Zen is somehow superior to other forms of religion. I don't want us to think that. I think we need to bring it back to where humans are, right? And as a human species overall, whether we're Zen Buddhist or something else or non-religious, we tend to think in terms of black and white. And what we're doing here, this project here at the Zen Center, is allowing ourselves to notice, like, that's how we do things, and it's not really serving us well for the most part. It's not serving us. And we might get our way sometimes, but oftentimes it comes at a big price. Somebody else has to pay often. So how do we reconcile with that? So what might a more mature faith look like? One, it's not a stopgap measure, right? It's not a God of the gaps that can be replaced with something else as soon as possible, right? As soon as you find the knowledge, it gets replaced. That's not faith. The other thing is that it's not about hope. We don't have to tie the word hope with faith either. Faith has vitality on its own without an object, such as Buddha or God. Faith has vitality on its own without an object, such as Buddha or God. And what Schellenberg says, he says, faith directed towards what he calls ultimism. Faith directed. So what is ultimism? The proposition, here's some philosophy for us to get our minds around. The proposition that something is ultimate in the nature of things, ultimately valuable, and the source of ultimate good. But the details of that something, it leaves open. Right? So he talks about what he defines as imaginative faith. Imaginative faith. So what is it? Imaginative faith? It's training the mind on what is deepest in the nature of things is also the greatest. What is deepest in the nature of things is also the greatest. Its wonders are in some way transformatively accessible for me and the world. You know, I'm going to bring this down to earth here and just say, you don't need to believe this, but you can imagine it to be so. You don't need to disbelieve it either. You don't need to disbelieve it or believe it. So 3 points I want to make regarding, actually, there's 3 points he makes regarding this imaginative faith. And I'm going to bring up just one of those 3 today, and I'm going to call it good. So there's the 3 of them. The 3 are downward, inward, and outward. Downward, inward, and outward. I'm going to talk about downward today and let go of inward and outward. But usually when we think of the word faith, we're thinking upward, right? Faith, upward. It's an upward direction of our attention. And he's suggesting going downward, which is, again, is very suitable to Zen. I remember early interaction with my teacher, and I can't remember exactly how it happened, but she was asking something, and I looked up towards the clouds, and she had me look down towards the cement. And I've seen that again and again with Zen teachers. It's like, come down to the concrete, like this here. We're not at we're at the beginning, not the end of an evolutionary process. We're at the beginning, not the end of an evolutionary process. We think we're at the end of an evolutionary process. Right? Like human beings, we've gotten to this point where, wow, and he's suggesting we're actually at the beginning. We're not done yet. That's good news. To me, that makes a lot of sense, because, boy, we do have a lot. We look around at the world, and it's, in a lot of ways, it's a mess. So we're at the beginning. We have these grand expectations that things are going to change, but the scale at which we think and the scale of evolutionary change are quite vastly different. Evolutionary change takes place over long periods of time, whereas we want things to change immediately, mostly, right? So what is this about downward? He suggests that there's no scriptures and rituals that have been passed down that are authoritarian or reliable.
Say that again.
No scriptures and rituals passed down to us that are authoritative, authoritative or reliable. There's no scriptures that have been passed down to us that are authoritative or reliable. It doesn't mean we shouldn't study what's been passed down to us, but I think we're in a unique place to catch this as Zen Buddha, in the Zen tradition, because we say Zen is not a tradition based on words and letters. It doesn't dismiss words and letters, but we don't have to get caught in these words and letters, even if the Buddha said it, even if the ancient masters said it. We can look at it, we can appreciate it, but it's not ultimately reliable. I don't feel like this is new information when he's saying this, but the way that it's said, it might feel new. Right? Jan Chosen Bezos is looking at some of the things that she wrote about faith and mind. She says about faith, she says, blind faith is replaced by lived experience. So in other words, we're not placing our faith in a scripture or in some words or in some instructions, but the faith is based on our lived experience. That's a different feeling to it than blind faith. any experience on one's own or with others in organized religion or outside of it may lead to insights of the greatest importance in this, with this kind of faith. Any experience, whether it's on one's own or with a group, whether it's in an organized religion or outside of organized religion, may have a deep insight that is of great importance. That's the kind of faith, this kind of faith. So it's not relying on a particular religion. Be open to learning in unexpected places. Be open to learning in unexpected places. So examples that he gives: eating. Right? Don't place a lot of attention on when we eat, how we eat in Zen. Eating, drinking, sleeping, thinking, making love, conversation, traveling, building, caring for animals, illness, ordinary events. This is all the realm of faith. So I want to maybe conclude with just one something to soak your imagination. The saying that Dogen has is, practice is enlightenment, right? Shusho ichinyo. Practice and enlightenment are one. And I want to suggest that when Dogen says this, that it's not a belief or a hope that we have, this idea that practice and enlightenment are one, but maybe it's a statement of imaginative faith. So let me give you two things to kind of feel here. These two statements. Imagine learning that you didn't lock your car door when you believed otherwise. Right? Imagine learning that you didn't lock your car door when you believed you had. Okay? Versus imagine learning that you didn't lock your car door when you only decided to trust that you had. Sometimes we get ourselves in these situations, right? We decide to trust. I think that I locked my car door. I'm just going to trust that I did. What happens when you find out that you didn't lock the door? If you're coming from the first statement, it's going to feel much different. You're going to be surprised, right? You're going to be surprised that from the first statement. If you imagine learning that you didn't lock your car door when you had believed otherwise, and then you find out you didn't. Find out what you thought was true isn't true, that's going to have a different consequence to your thoughts. Versus if you decided to trust that you did lock your door, and then you find out that you didn't, that's going to have a different qualitative mental experience. And in the same way, imagine that you are Buddha already. Now imagine that you're Buddha already, yeah?
Wait, what do you think the experience would be if you were to trust that your car door was locked? Would you be angry?
Well, what do you, maybe somebody else can, like, what do you...
Like, I just want to see the difference between that belief and trust, so I just wanted to hear you fully explain.
Yeah, explain a little bit more, okay. I'm not sure I can, but I will do my best. Maybe somebody can fill in if it...
I just wouldn't trust myself then. And I have faith in myself if I didn't do what I thought I was supposed to do.
I thought of this kind of way. It was like, whoa, I can't trust myself.
Can't trust yourself.
How did that happen? Was I not paying attention? Oh my God, what's the matter?
But then you believed that you had done it. That's different.
I wasn't as disappointed. I believed I had. Oh, I hadn't. Okay. But if I had trusted I had, that's a very different one.
Oh, okay.
If I had faith that I had locked it, that's something that I should have been able to rely on. Whereas a belief, I don't have to trust a belief.
You don't have to.
Belief is fleeing.
Right.
I could believe it one minute and not believe it.
Oh, you're taking a different
I don't have
direction.
trust in myself, then I can't rely on myself. Whereas
Oh.
you never rely on a belief.
Oh.
I wouldn't, anyway. That's not.
I guess I saw it a different way.
Yeah.
I saw it a different way. At least the way that I was understanding this. And again, I'm struggling to understand this myself.
I had maybe. I feel like if I trust that I had done something, so if I believe it, it is my reality. And that's just true. But if I just trust that I've done something, then it begins with doubt.
Mm-hmm.
So the doubt is already there. So when I
Mhm.
find that this thing I chose to trust turns out to not be true, well, that's okay because I'm already
There you go.
in touch with that.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is this is what I'm talking about. This is the trust that allows doubt to be present. Does that make sense? You know, so if you find out it not being true, it's okay because there's doubt there as well, right? Does that help?
You
But
make
that's
a
an
decision to
assumption.
trust, right?
You make a decision to trust, knowing that there's some doubt. There's some doubt there, and it's inclusive of doubt.
It also seems like a self-responsibility.
Yeah. There's some.
Trusting myself, so I'm not gonna go back and do that, and like try to lock my car again.
Right. I'm not going to go back because I trust it, but then I find out, oh, I didn't lock the door. Okay. Yeah, I made a mistake. I'm not devastated by it. As opposed to if I get locked into a belief, yes, I definitely did do that. Then I set myself up for failure. Like, oh, did that? Okay.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Right. I believe I did it, and you might argue about it.
Well, and if you believe you did it, and then you find the car is unlocked, the first thing you might think was that, who unlocked my car?
Right. So there's no accountability, right? Okay. Exactly my point. Exactly. So this is the kind of trust that we can use. It can be very useful when we're thinking about this statement: practice and enlightenment are one. So imagine that you are Buddha already because you decided to trust that you are. Sometimes people have a problem with this. You know, Zen says we're Buddha. Practice itself is enlightened. Practice itself is Buddha. And you don't have to believe that. This is where I'm going. You don't have to believe that for it to be beneficial or helpful. So, but having faith, this is what faith in mind is about. It's faith in trusting your own Buddha nature. You can still acknowledge you have ways to go. Right? In this kind of thinking, you could still acknowledge, even though you're a Buddha, you can still acknowledge that you have ways to go. However, when you imagine what we're learning from neuroscientists is that the impulses are being sent to emotional centers like the orbitofrontal cortex, the affective, I don't know these words, but affective stratium, the amygdala, these different regions of the brain, in much the same way that belief does. Yeah.
One more. Is science itself a belief?
Well, that's another question. But what we're seeing, like what a neuroscientist is demonstrating here, according to this guy, is that when we look closely at what's happening physiologically in terms of belief and in terms of this faith that we're talking about here, physiologically there's the same response from the body, right? So even if you don't believe, even if you have faith that you're a Buddha but don't believe it, you still have the same physiological response. I think that's interesting. You don't have to believe it in order to have the same Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
That makes sense. So Darshan is faith an antidote to fear?
Is faith an antidote to fear? Well, I don't know. I would go in that direction with this. I don't know if I would go in that direction. It might be. Is faith an antidote to fear? It can be. I think it can be. Yeah, faith without belief. Yeah.
Do you have an example?
Yeah.
Yeah, one I've been thinking about, if you'll bear with me a second. So I work at Google, and we're creating an AI right now. And our CEO said this will have the most profound impact on humanity since fire, like 2 million years ago, when Homo erectus controlled fire. And I have faith that this will be a positive thing for humanity, because I don't want to fear that it won't.
Right.
That's just ignorance.
Well, again, there's so that's where we tie together faith and belief. You can have faith in what you're doing without the belief. It may not, right? So it's leaving room for doubt. You can have faith in it, but not to let yourself, like, if it turns out to be a complete disaster in the end, then you're not totally taken off guard. Like, okay, we tried this, and this is what happened.
Reminds me of the phrase "trust but verify."
Trust but verify, yeah. Yeah.
It leaves room for doubt.
It leaves room for the doubt, yeah. We tend to, science can be our new God, and we tend to believe in science, right? And that's just replacing science and religion. It's just like doing a swap. And so what he's saying is that separate out faith from belief. So we could have faith without the belief.
Okay.
And as far as getting back to Zen goes, we can feel what it's like to be a Buddha without having to believe that it is true. We can feel what it's like to be a Buddha without having to believe that that is true. That keeps us humble. Right?
So when you're talking in interfaith circles and you talk about faith and belief it just seems like, for me, if I use that word, there's an expectation that it means belief. There's an expectation.
I know, that's the problem.
And so I don't want to go into like, well, hold on, we have to listen to this lecture by Daishin so you understand what we're talking about. So I tend to do the opposite and refuse to use those words, which is probably not helpful at all. So what do you do?
So, I mean, this is an opening conversation that you can have. And like, maybe one possibility here is to say, hey, you know what? We, in the Zen tradition, we don't necessarily need to believe it's true to have faith in it. I mean, you can say something like that, possibly say, you could have faith without belief. I mean, that might be an opening for a conversation, but I don't think we're quite ready. We may not be quite ready to say that. So that's why I wanted to suggest to us that we think about this and verify it for ourselves. Like, when I say I have, first of all, what do you put your faith in? And is it tied to like having to have a belief connected to it? Does it have to have belief connected to it? So maybe just on your own, explore that connection between faith and belief and question it. Question whether, can you have the faith? Because faith, again, there's a physiological response when you bring faith into it. But when we remove the belief element, we are safeguarding ourselves from when what we think is true, it turns out not to be. And yet we need faith.
Does faith allow us to do what's right?
Well, here's where, if we switch to the Asian understanding of this word shin, it means to carry out what your word is. Right, so that's where the ethics is. Don't say something that you can't deliver on. So if Google is going to say this is going to change everything, well, I hope they can back it up.
Right.
But this is where I think teasing out the belief part and having a little doubt there is probably healthy. A little skepticism in our age is very healthy. I wouldn't trust completely, but you have to have faith to a certain degree that what you're doing is, again, as soon as I say that, I'm tying in belief with that. So separating out the faith, you might have to do some work connected to it, but you don't necessarily have to believe in it. But you can have faith That's not tied to that.
Okay.
Something I'm hearing in the difference between those is belief comes with an unexamined identity. Like we believe things we might not even realize we are believing things. Like we walk outside, we believe that our car will start and we'll get to work today without even thinking about it. Whereas trust is, or faith, I guess, which is like doubtful trust, maybe is different. It's an action. It's like a conscious decision to say, you know, I trust that my car will make it today. I'm not going to take any actions otherwise. You know, I'm not going to like call my friend or call an Uber and have an Uber lined up just because my car might not work.
It's a way of living, as opposed to something else. It's a way of living our life, a life of faith. And when we get into the sutra and into this song, into this poem, I think it helps to, you know, it's giving us these pairs of opposites. Don't do this, you know, this or this. We live in these pairs of opposites. We come down on one side or the other. And so a bigger picture of faith is to hold these opposites. Hold them both, to not come down on one side or the other. Paradox, yeah. Opening that might be a simple way to say it. Paradox. Yeah, Pam?
I really like that Ken brought up the idea of doubt, because in my experience with practice and the teachings, that doubt is really a vital part of the practice and can be used, in ways of furthering your practice. So I keep thinking here, it's like almost having faith in doubt.
Yeah, faith and doubt. Yeah, or having skepticism. Yeah.
Keeping an open mind.
Keeping an open mind would be another thing. Yeah.
So, sorry.
Yeah,
Like
please.
this with Mike's example of the car. You have faith and doubt about the car that you have purchased reliably and know it's a good car, but now you're supposed to have faith and doubt that it's gonna start at the same time? That's where I'm kind of,
I mean, eventually,
you're losing me.
eventually the car's not gonna start. Someday you're gonna wake up, that car's not gonna start. That's just,
Yes, but.
it could be tomorrow, it could be 10 years from now.
It could, but as a conscientious, faithful, trustworthy person, you've put some things in place where you will have indicators when that day is getting close, and then you'll sell the car. Maybe I'm taking this.
Yeah, and that's just like practice,
Yeah.
You're a conscientious person, you practice the way, you do the things to, further your progress in it, but, part of your process of picking a car was skepticism about, the things that might attract you to certain cars.
Well, think about it too, is like if you simply have an unexamined belief that the car will always start every day, you might not ever check the battery, or you might not ever, get the oil changed, or might not, take good care of it. And so, but if you trust that it's gonna start, you need to have a pragmatic understanding in examining that belief that your car is fairly reliable, then you might take actions to make it true.
Right. I
Yeah.
guess I'm having, to me, this is all very detailed and technical, so at this bigger level, how are we supposed to have faith and belief?
Right,
This is-
right. So I think the problem is though that we do unintentionally tie faith and belief together, and we only realize that when we get disappointed, or when we get super surprised that something didn't work that was supposed to, and then we realize, oh, it's because I believed. Well, we might not realize that, but I'm just shining a light on a particular aspect of practice where we tend to tie these two things together. Believe, we think believe, and we don't realize how much we believe in something versus simply. And so when we lose our faith or our beliefs go, we tend to get rid of the baby in the bathwater. But faith is something separate from that. And it's more of a life orientation as opposed to a belief in something. God comes and goes. That's been my experience. I've had a concept of God, and it was too small, and it went. And that's where I was introduced to Zen. And then you have a bigger idea of what God is. That's better than, it fits better. But if our faith is based in a God that comes and goes, we're going to lose it. So faith doesn't have to be tied to belief. And we do the same thing with Buddhism, right? If I believe in Buddha, everything's going to be okay. Or even Zazen, like Zazen is going to make it better. Whereas we're just, we come with an attitude of faith that's not tied to any expectations. Maybe that's another way to say it.
I think that's, in my mind, that's much better.
Trusting
Is it clear?
That makes more sense to me.
Okay. Yeah.
Because what was the thing you said earlier about having faith? I don't know, if you are the Buddha or not, that you can have faith that you're being Buddha-like, but you don't believe you're Buddha. That's, I don't know, however you
That doesn't make sense to you. Okay, sure.
I see it as practicing what you preach. That's the faith aspect of it, where you don't have to believe in this God that's going to do things for you, that's going to make things for you. You're going to be practicing it and living what you see benefits humanity, yourself, your community.
Mm-hmm.
Daishin. A thought that occurred to me was to put this into like the giver, receiver, and gift context. When you were contrasting the more like European versus more Asian conceptions of faith, it occurred to me that they both share this idea of like trust as the gift here, but perhaps in like the Christian context, a faithful person is one who gives lots of trust to God, to the Bible, to the church, to the doctrine, all of which are assumed to be worthy of that trust.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
That can be perhaps lacking in discretion about how to give that trust, whereas it sounds like in more the Asian context, there's a lot of caution around the giver role, that a person of faith is someone who is very cautious about giving their word and always follows through with that. We're very attentive about how we give our attention to things. And by showing respect and restraint in that giver role, we are also proving ourselves to be worthy receivers of someone else's trust.
Man, I couldn't say it better. Let's end let's end on that one. Yes, thank you. That's right on. All right.
Closing chant, call and response. The many beings are numberless, vowing to carry them across. The many beings are numberless, vowing to carry them across. Greed, anger, and ignorance rise endlessly, vowing to cut off the mind road. Greed, anger, and ignorance rise endlessly, vowing to cut off the mind road. Dharma gates are countless, vowing to wake to them all. Dharma gates are countless, vowing to wake to them all. Buddha's way is all embracing, vowing to follow through. Buddha's way is all embracing, vowing
close out, just trying to think of announcements. One thing is that Annette Jordan, who many of you may know, who's an excellent person at what she does, which is she is offering a mindful self-compassion course coming summer, and there's a free introductory workshop on the 25th of March. So anyone who's interested in that, please email us at our Nebraska Zen Center website or email, and let us know, because it may determine whether she holds the workshop or not. So
Also, we have a session next month.
we have a session in April, 3-day or 2.5 day. It's April, which I don't have a calendar in front of me, but it's third weekend in April.
See you there.
I can't remember.
15th.
I think it's the second, yeah, 15th,
13th to the 15th.
13th to the 15th, yeah.
Okay.
Tax day.
Tax day.
Tax machine.
Yes, so we'll have registration up for that very soon, and details about the schedule.
And if anybody wants to have Doksan before I take off today, please let me know. I can do that right now.
I guess prior to that, also, April 8th is Buddha's birthday. We'll be celebrating that on April 9th here with a special service and probably a potluck. And the day before that is Spiritual Saturday. The city is, or whoever deals with the downtown park is organizing a day where different churches or religions can come and, have booths. And so everyone is welcome to join us for that. It's what, 11 to 2?
I believe so,
I think so, yeah. And we'll have more information out about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Put our cushions back, brush them off, and then we'll bow out together.